love going to the movies. I know Netflix is cool, but there's something about going to the movies. The smell of popcorn, when you get into your seats and you sit down and you start watching a film and there's a particularly funny moment and the whole audience erupts in laughter. I love that. I love when a really good romance movie actually causes people in the audience to start choking a little bit and sniffing, and you can sense the tears coming down on their faces. So suspense movies are great too, but I get really into them, so occasionally I'll like elbow someone by accident or kick someone. And there was a particular moment when I saw the movie Inception where I was so consumed with anxiety about what was gonna happen that I jumped and fell out of my chair. So I get into movies. It's not so good when I start watching a movie and it's late at night. How many of you know that deep feeling of exhaustion? Where you're aware, it's sort of this out-of-body experience, and you're aware that, you should keep your eyes open, but if you just closed them for a moment, if you just sort of rested your chin on your hand, maybe you could stay awake, and then all of a sudden you realize you're not awake, you're asleep. It's very disorienting. It's hard to see clearly. All of a sudden, all the sounds become magnified. The ability to stay connected completely falls apart. We all get to that point where tension and physical exhaustion overtakes us. Perhaps some of you are there right now. It's interesting to me because we try to distract ourselves by pulling our cell phones out or eating a snack really slowly or doing something on a notepad just to kind of keep ourselves distracted from falling asleep. But what we know is this. It's ironic because we're so aware of this physical need for sleep. We're so aware of that deep, penetrating exhaustion. And yet, we're very rarely in tune with our spiritual exhaustion. This week and in the past few weeks, you've had a chance to hear about conflict and peacemakers, conflict strategies, the importance and resurgence of friendship. Soon, later this afternoon, you'll hear from Dr. Carolyn Kim about social media and friendship. She's awesome. So at this point in the semester, you're probably pretty familiar with these terms. I'd say you're kind of experts, and you might be thinking in this moment while you're here, what on earth could this speaker have to say about friendship and conflict that I haven't heard already? What I'd like to ask you is, have you considered how Sabbath fits into conflict? I wish that we could just sit around a table together and drink coffee. I want to, instead of giving you more conflict strategies, just carve out a space right here and right now, as if we were sitting and having coffee together. And if we were, I'd be clutching my coffee cup like a tiny little hug, and I would look to you and I would say, now that you've heard about friendship and conflict, where are you going to get the energy to do those things well? Where are you going to get the energy to do those things well? So in the next few minutes, that's what I'd like to talk with you about. How regularly incorporating a Sabbath into your life helps give you perspective, sure. But more than that, consistent Sabbath helps cultivate an ability to persevere during hard times. Just as there are physical issues with sleep that negatively impact us, there are also spiritual issues when we are not resting with God. Now, I see some of your faces and recognize some of you. So if you know me, you know I love coffee. And I particularly love white chocolate mochas. And every day before I come to campus, I stop by my favorite coffee place, and they know me so well, they'll just say, Molloy, hot or cold? And I'll say hot or cold. And they'll, get me my coffee. Over the years, I've grown to love the coffee flavor more and the white chocolate mocha just a little bit less. So at this point in my coffee experience, I just like one pump. And because of that, and because they know me, they give it to me for free. So I go to my coffee place, they give me my white chocolate mocha for free, and it's awesome. But a little while ago, I get there, no one says hot or cold, and I realize there's a new person behind the cash register. So I smile, my little smile, and I'm like, yeah, I'd love that. White chocolate mocha, substitute the one pump of white mocha. I say substitute in hopes that she'll pick up on the fact that I get this for free. She doesn't. She looks at me and she charges me for it. And so I smile and I'm like, they usually give that to me for free. She looks at me again and pretty rudely responds, now I'd like to say I was all sorts of nice to her. But instead, it was early morning, pre-caffeinated me. And so I say in a really snarky voice, thanks for your excellent customer service. Like I even used the gun finger, And as soon as I did that, I felt my heart start to beat faster. I felt sick. I started sweating. I was immediately aware of the ugliness I'd just shown her. And then I was immediately aware that I hadn't spent time with the Lord that morning. And then I was immediately aware that I hadn't really taken time to Sabbath over the weekend. How many of you have had a moment like this recently? Where you wish you'd been just a little more kind and a little less cynical or sarcastic? I don't think that spending time with God and reading your Bible is like rubbing a genie lamp and out pops this prayer that you make and is granted to you. I don't think that. But I do want to suggest this. How we respond to relational conflict of any kind reflects the geography of our own spiritual lives. How we respond to relational conflict reveals the geography of our own spiritual lives. It shows us the terrain of what's going on inside of us. It's like a GoPro camera, and we get to see parts of ourselves that we don't normally get to see. It shows what's underneath the surface. It shows what's really going on. What conflict mostly does is show us where our heart is at. What Sabbath mostly does is remind us where our hearts should be. So before we go any farther, I should probably explain what I mean by Sabbath. Personally, I never understood the point, besides the fact that it was a command. It either left me feeling lonely, stressed, or bored. I just did not understand it. And then, about 5 years ago, I started thinking about the fact that Sabbath is really another way of tithing your time. For whatever reason, since the time I had an allowance, I've understood how to tithe. You take the little part of money that you have and you give it because it's all God's. For whatever reason, that's never been a hard thing for me. Everything I have is God's. So when I began understanding that tithing my time is similar, it's a symbolic act of saying, Father, you are in charge of all of my time, and so I'm going to symbolically take a portion of my time and give it to you. Tithing your time. Training your ear to hear his voice. Stepping away from the tyranny of the urgent. Remembering who's in charge. Not just that he's actually God, but he's the best teacher. He's the best coach. In Matthew 11, it says this, get away with me and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take real rest. Walk with me, work with me. Watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me and you'll learn to live freely and lightly. Here's the thing, there will always be a reason not to do it. There will always be plenty of things on your plate. There will always be. But that should not be the reason. The focus should be on the reason to pursue it. So Sabbath also helps us approach conflict well because it acts as an internal compass. Conflict can be very disorienting. And when we're spiritually exhausted, it's hard to know what steps to take. When I was in 5th grade, I went to Wild Waves, which is a place in Seattle, Washington, and you go on all sorts of rides in the water. Go Seattle, yeah, okay. And the lifeguards were flirting with each other, so they didn't really see that I had come to the top of the slide, and I get ready to go down, and it's one of those slides that shoots you off really fast. So I did that, and it was awesome, but then the person behind me also came up and got on too fast, and so I was at the bottom, and he shot down so hard that he ran into me and shoved my shoulder out of its socket. Now, I'm in 5th grade and I barely know how to swim at all, and so he shoves me way down and I get sort of disoriented. I'm swimming with one arm and I swim to the bottom of the water instead of the top, and I take a big gulp of water. And it occurs to me all the feet above me are showing me that the up is that way. And I have this moment where I actually think I'm gonna die. Like, I had this moment and I thought, well, I'm gonna miss my folks, but I'll see you soon, God. And I close my eyes and I pass out. I wake up later and I'm okay. It took me a while to get used to being in the water again. But the point is, I didn't know which way was up. When you have conflict with someone, it's very disorienting. Sabbath helps you know which way is up. So there was a particular point in this semester, because I'm always fighting for Sabbath. It's never an easy thing. I have to fight for it, where I was feeling particularly weary. And I thought, okay, God, I'm going to spend some time focusing on how not to be weary. So let's tackle James, because James says, consider it pure joy when you face trials of many kind. The testing of your faith produces perseverance. Swell, I've heard that before. I didn't quite hear this other part, though, until this particular moment. Let perseverance finish its work, so you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. Let it finish its work. Don't just start, let it finish. I wonder, with this Google it culture and a get it today on Amazon kind of way, if we've somehow lost the art of long-term perseverance. So for you, what comes to mind when you think about the term perseverance? Just think for a moment. When you think perseverance, what comes to mind? For me, 2 things come to mind: Finding Nemo and Leslie Knope from Parks and Rec. Now, in Finding Nemo, there's this clownfish dad, and he's looking for his son, and that's a sweet story. But I love Dory. What is she known for saying? Just keep swimming, keep on swimming, right? She's awesome. Leslie Knope. She's a little bit weird. She's got a super upbeat personality. She makes lots of binders, and her love for waffles just goes beyond my love for coffee, which is surprising. But she also has a resilience to persevere. Perseverance can be described in several ways, but essentially it's about having a proactive attitude, taking proactive steps, regardless of the change in circumstances. Now, this is easy for us to talk about right now when we're cozy in the gym. It's much harder when your computer crashes. It's much harder when relationships end. It's much harder when they begin. It's much harder when family pressures happen, or celebrations or self-expectations become overwhelming. So, make a habit of stepping away from the tyranny of the urgent. Be watchful of your spiritual exhaustion and cultivate a posture of Sabbath. Okay, so let's revisit the intersection between Sabbath and conflict and friendship. Here's the thing. When we are spiritually exhausted, it can create a defensiveness in us that is a deeply rooted form of cynicism. And our ability to be open and supportive with our friends is significantly diminished. Supportiveness is expressing value for the other person. Hey, I like you. Thanks so much for doing that. That was a really great comment. Openness is the willingness to actually tell them what you're thinking. You know, I really appreciated that, but actually, and then you can share what you're really thinking. It's good. Research shows that sustained stress, an enormous amount of stress over and over again, actually reduces our awareness of others and of ourselves. It actually blocks our ability to see and interpret relevant social information, creating a cycle of increased confusion and anxiety. Self-focus, mental overload. It often causes us to respond in hurried, unthinking ways. When was the last time you responded in a hurried, unthinking way? For me, I can easily go to experiences in work. I love my job. If we had time, I would share with you why having your job be a sense of your calling, fitting core into what your passion and skill set is the best possible gift. And when I started here and I would get a paycheck in the mail, I'd be like, oh my gosh, what is this? I get paid to do this? That's awesome. Because I would do this for free because I care so much about you. But there are times where my email box becomes flooded with messages, and I'm running from meeting to meeting, eating the third protein bar because I haven't had time to eat a real meal in between. And there are moments where it's easy to respond in a hurried manner and not pause and include compassion and empathy, to forget that every single email is actually a real concern, a question with a real person who has a full life. So here's the key takeaway. The excuse that a person says something simply because it's true when it knowingly injures another person is rarely an admirable quality. It actually reveals a lack of intelligence and critical thinking, an absence of communication competence, and an underdeveloped understanding of the value of empathy. Honesty without kindness is ego-centered instead of other-centered. So, if you're struggling to have compassion for someone, you might want to ask yourself, how is my Sabbath time going these days? Am I resting? Do I need to take time and get perspective? Carving out a time of Sabbath is particularly powerful, of course, but you want to make sure that we remind ourselves throughout the week. For me, this happens by incorporating a daily breath prayer. Breath prayer, according to Richard J. Foster, is based off of the ethos of the Psalms, where a repeated phrase reminds us of a promise of God or a character attribute of God. It quite literally means a short, simple prayer of petition that can be spoken in one breath. The most famous of breath prayers is, Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner. How do I do this? Well, I love my phone apps. I love the calendar. I love to schedule things. While I do miss crossing things off of real paper and pen, it's nice to have it on your phone. I also really like the reminder app. I put everything on that app, so I no longer remember things on my own, which is probably problematic. But for this point, it's a really good thing. And what I've done is that every day at 11 o'clock, my breath prayer pops up on my reminder. And I stop. And I just breathe it in. For me right now, it's from Psalm 62. My salvation and my honor depends on God. He is my mighty rock, my refuge. Trust in him at all times. For me, this breath prayer is powerful because it's easy to forget where your honor comes from. It's easy to forget where you should trust. So I have to remind myself every day at 11 o'clock. So let's just try this together, shall we? If you would, just for a moment, close your eyes. Just close your eyes, if you will. Don't worry about the person next to you. And let's breathe in and breathe out 1 or 2 times. So breathing in, breathing out. Breathing in, breathing out. If you're willing, keep your eyes closed just for a moment longer. Tell the Lord what's on your mind and heart at this moment. What are you worried about? What are you anxious about? What is causing you stress? In this moment, what attribute of God are you most thankful for? Now, combine this thing of stress and exhaustion with this attribute of God. What kind of breath prayer could you use here? What kind of breath prayer could you insert and remind yourself sometime throughout the day? Maybe it's 1 Peter 5:7. Cast all your anxiety on him because he cares for you. Okay, so if you're hearing these things and you're thinking, swell, Dr. Molloy, great idea. I'll figure this out next semester. I've got to get through this semester. There is no way. Or maybe you're trying to be a little more realistic and positive at the same time. So you're like, sure, after Thanksgiving, that's when I'll start considering this. I'd like to suggest that you don't wait. I'd like to suggest that you consider seeing if you can crack through a window of time right now. And you might be asking, how do I even do that? I'll tell you how I started. During my first year of my PhD program in Denver, Colorado, where, by the way, you can go hiking so close to the Estes Mountain, Estes Park, and Rocky Mountains, it's awesome. But during my first year there, I knew nobody. I moved to Denver on my own, didn't know anyone, and I got food poisoning twice, don't eat the sushi there, and my computer crashed twice in 1 month. This was before I learned how to back things up. So I lost everything. Now, the food poisoning happened around 2 in the morning. I don't know if you've had food poisoning, but you know something bad's about to happen. And so you try to figure out where the closest bathroom is. So I stumbled to my bathroom, and, things happened. And then I'm laying there on the ground, and I'm shivering, don't know anybody, too exhausted and sick to move and call anyone. So I pull the bath mat from the floor and kind of cover myself up. And I'm kind of just laying there thinking about life. And I begin realizing this is not a sustainable way to live. I need some rest. But then I also think about all the work that I have to do. And so I hear that lie. I just need to get through this semester. So after a few days, I recover, I become rehydrated, drinking lots of liquids, and I'm leafing through my calendar thinking, oh yeah, sure, I should take a day off, so, okay, well this week's not gonna work. Yeah, this month's not gonna work. Oh, okay, 3 months from now, I'm gonna take an hour off on this day. It's gonna be awesome. And I had one of those moments where I felt the Holy Spirit tap in my heart and say this: if you wait until there's a good time, you will never start. If you wait until there's a good time, you will never start. So carve out a time for Sabbath. It requires that you say no to things. Even this week, I had to fight for the idea of Sabbath. It had dropped on my priority list, and I had to reconsider some commitments I already made. And feel a little bit humiliated to say, I'm so sorry I committed to this, but I actually can't do it. I really need to take a Sabbath. It might require that you plan better and work really, really hard the day or two before your Sabbath. But whatever it takes, pursue it. Make it happen. You might not be perfect at it. It's not about perfection. Sabbath is messy. Sabbath is about figuring things out. This summer, I took an extended Sabbath for the entire month of July. I worked really, really hard in June and really, really hard in August, but in the month of July, I took an intro to kayaking class. I cooked my way through an entire cookbook. It was awesome. And it was messy, and some days I did it well, and other days I didn't. I take one day off a week, and some days I do it well, and other days I don't. If your goals for this Sabbath, if you make a Sabbath goal this week and it doesn't work out, that's okay. Try again. Falling is not failing. Abraham Lincoln said this: I'm not concerned that you have fallen. We all fall. We all are messy. I'm not concerned that you've fallen. I am concerned that you arise. How will you arise today? What are the things that you can do to carve out that time for Sabbath? Figure out what it looks like for you. If going to the grocery store is fun and helps you meditate on Christ, go to the grocery store. Gardening would be the worst thing for me to do ever. I'd kill plants just by looking at them, so that would not be for me. Remember that Sabbath is not the same as a retreat, so it's not that you're supposed to go away and be by yourself. Often Sabbath is expressed best with community, but the point of Sabbath is to symbolically tithe your time to God. How can you do that well? How can you do that well? Falling can be messy, but it's in the rising that we cultivate perseverance. And it's in the resting that we find our relational compass. So before you think about the strategies of conflict, before you consider the concepts of friendship, I would ask that you consider, where are you in your Sabbath? No shame, just start. I'd like to conclude today and have us spend a little more time in prayer, and I'd like for you to try to locate a breath prayer that will help usher in that posture of Sabbath.
We hope you enjoyed this message. Biola University offers a variety of biblically centered degree programs, ranging from business to ministry to the arts and sciences. Learn more at biola.edu.